This video demonstration is going to be about basic portrait retouching using retouching tools and then softening features and sharpening features using the high pass filter in Photoshop. So the very first thing that you're going to need to do is you need to make a copy of your background layer by dragging that and dropping it to the new layer icon in the lower right hand corner. Let's go ahead and double click on this background copy and rename it Retouch. On your retouch layer, this is where you do direct modifying of your image. So what I want to demonstrate to you just in this particular tutorial is retouching tools, which are located right here. So there are three main retouching tools that I typically use whenever I'm doing portrait retouching. And that is the spot healing brush, the healing brush, and the patch. So I'm actually going to go through each of these individually and click on the spot healing brush. Additional options for the spot healing brush are going to be located up here at the top. Do make sure that your hardness is kind of low, because if it's really high, then it's going to create these really obvious circles around areas that you're trying to cover up. So let's get our magnifying glass and zoom in. And when you're doing portrait retouching, you have to get in close to your image so that you can work on those fine details that when people really kind of get in close and look, they'll be able to notice. So going back now, let's go ahead and click that spot healing brush. You can use the open and closed brackets on your keyboard to make your brush bigger or smaller. And what you want to do with this particular retouching tool is you want to just resize it so that it fits over whatever it is that you are trying to cover up. So I'm just going to go over these little spots right here. And all I'm doing, I'm not doing anything special with my keyboard. I'm just resizing my brush and I'm single clicking over these little areas. And what this actually does is it grabs the pixels from around whatever it is that you're trying to cover up and it evens those out for you. Okay? So this is good just for tiny little spots. It is not good for larger areas. So don't try to do large areas with this guy right here. And you can see actually that it's not doing a very good job with that line right there. So I'll show you how to use another tool in order to get that smoothed out. And so very quickly, if you go over and turn your eyeball off and on, you can see the before and after of using that tool. So before and after. So very quick fix there. Okay. So let's go ahead and go back to our original image here. And we'll make another retouch copy because I want to show you how to use the healing brush tool. And I think this actually really is preferred for me over the spot healing brush because it actually has a little bit more control over colors. Again, additional options for your healing brush are going to be located up here at the top. And it's a little bit more difficult to use, but I think a bit more effective. So what you do is you actually want to hover over the color that you want to cover up. So I actually want to use this color right here, which is within my circle, to cover up this area right here. So I'm going to click Option on my keyboard and click, and that has selected that color for me. And now when I single click, it's going to apply that color. Option click, Option click. And what it does is it just, what I believe, it kind of evens out the colors just a little bit more naturally because you can option click close to whatever it is that you're trying to cover up and it chooses the colors that best match with that and apply it a little bit more seamlessly than the spot healing brush. The spot healing brush can get kind of dark in some and patchy in some areas, which isn't good. So this line right here that I couldn't really get rid of with the spot healing brush earlier, I can now get rid of with the healing brush. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm just pressing Option and click, and I'm gathering color from this area of her chin to apply that and to get rid of that line. And that just already looks so much better. Okay, so that is using the healing brush tool. One of my other favorite retouching tools to use is the patch tool. And this is nice to do when you're kind of dealing with larger areas of color. So like here with her lips, I want to even out these areas, but I want to do it a little bit more quickly. So again, additional options for your patch are going to be located up here at the top. The way the patch tool works is that you circle what you want to get rid of and you move it to what you want it to become. And what that does is it actually replaces that with the pattern that you move it to, which is kind of cool. So I'm going to circle this and move it. Circle this white area and move that. Circle this and move it. And obviously you're going to want to move it typically somewhere close by because that's where your colors are going to be the same. So I'm circling what I want to get rid of and moving it to what I want it to become. So say for instance, I wanted to adjust, let's move that, there we go. Say for instance, I wanted to adjust like this area right here. If I move that to her teeth, it's going to try to become her teeth. Obviously, we don't want to do that. Let's step back in our history and get rid of that. If I need to get rid of something here, okay, what you need to do is you need to kind of match up. If I move this down, skin is going to start to come on her lips. So I need to kind of look at where it is that I'm lining up my patch tool so that the lines line up nicely, okay? So eyeball off, eyeball on. So using the healing brush tool and the patch tool to just touch up some areas. Again, she's got a couple of little areas right here that I think could be evened out or brightened up. So I'll just circle here and I'll actually move this to that lighter area. And what that does is that just evens out that color tone. Okay, so patch tool, good for working with larger areas and evening out colors. Okay. So let's go ahead and zoom out now just a little bit. And we're going to start to, once we've finished doing all of our small retouching, and make sure to take note of that because you don't want to soften or sharpen until you've totally finished with your retouching. We're going to go ahead and do that by making a copy of our retouch layer. So we're going to drag that to the new layer icon. And let's go ahead and start off by sharpening. So let's call this Sharpen. In order to start sharpening, you go up to Filter, Other, and High Pass. And what this is going to do is it's going to essentially bring out all of the lines in your image. You typically want to adjust this anywhere from 7 to 10, depending on your photograph. You really have to just kind of look at the lines and see how intense they get. That is going to be way too intense, and this is going to be way too subtle. So pulling it up to about 7 to 10 is typically fine. Just make sure that you're not getting really, really hard lines when you adjust that, and click OK. So I brought out all the lines using High Pass. Now what I need to do is I need to combine that with my retouch layer. So I'm going to go over here to this drop-down menu and select Overlay. And what that did, if I turn the eyeball off and on, that overlaid those really sharp edges with my retouch. Unfortunately, I don't want everything in my image to be super sharp. So at this point, what I need to do is I need to go down here and I need to add a layer mask to this sharpen layer so I can start to deactivate some areas. The easiest way to go about doing this is just by deactivating the layer altogether. So let's go ahead and just get the paint bucket. Make sure your foreground color is black and click on the photo. And essentially what I did was I just deactivated that sharpness, okay? In order to reactivate the sharpness now where I want it to go, I'm going to switch my foreground color to white to reactivate. And I'm going to grab a brush, okay? Let's get a magnifying glass and zoom out because I'm going to want to sharpen her hair, all right? Make sure that you have a soft brush selected. Do not select a hard brush. We want to work subtly here. And then you're going to want to adjust the opacity of your brush too. If you have it at 100%, it's going to be really, really sharp. So start at 80 at the highest, and then we can adjust later. So I'm going to resize my brush, and I'm actually going to start to brush over areas like her hair. Okay, so what we're doing now is we are reactivating that sharpness. Make sure that you are constantly resizing your brush with those open and closed brackets so that you're not sharpening too much, okay? So resize your brush. Sharpen areas like the eyes. So resizing my brush really small to get those eyes. The eyebrows just a little bit. Get your brush really small and go over those individual eyelashes to bring those out. Adjust your brush really small and go over contours of the face. That's going to make them appear more three-dimensional. So along the jawline, for instance, is a really good place to go. Creases in the cheek. Okay. So I've brought out the sharpness in the hair, in the eyes, in the eyebrows, and the contours of the face. So you can see what I have reactivated in my little layer mask over here. If I turn the eyeball off and on, you can see now where that sharpness is being distributed. If I lower the opacity of the layer too, that's just another way that I can go about kind of softening or making the sharpness a little bit more subtle without dealing with adjusting the opacity of the brush, okay? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do the same process over again, but now I'm going to do it to soften because I want to soften things like the skin. So I'm going to go to my retouch layer, drag and drop that down to the new layer icon. And let's go ahead and name this Soften this time. Same exact process as Sharpen. We're going to go up to Filter, Other, and High Pass. I typically keep the radius the same for the Soften and the Sharpen, but you can adjust it accordingly. The higher you pull up the Sharpen, the more soft your image is going to be. So again, just working subtly between 7 and 10 pixels is usually the best. And we'll go ahead and click OK. One added step with this is that you will need to invert this sharpness, because if we go to the blending mode and select overlay now, it's going to make everything sharp. So what we need to do is we need to actually go up to, let's see, select, press Command and I on your keyboard. There we go. That's it. Okay. Command plus I on your keyboard, and that will invert it. So what it does is it actually takes all of those really sharp lines and it reverses that and inverts it. So then what you do whenever you go to your blending modes drop down menu and you select overlay, everything is really soft. Okay, in older versions of Photoshop they had invert at the top, but I guess they don't anymore. So pressing Command and I will get you there. So again, we need to add a layer mask to this, which is this rectangular box with the open circle. Turn the eyeball off and on. Everything is really super duper soft. So we want to control where all of that softness is actually going. So let's go ahead and get our paint bucket again. Switch to black and deactivate that. And now what we can go ahead and do is switch to white, get a brush, and we can reactivate where we want the softness to go. For Soften, you really want to work with an opacity of no higher than 50% because it does get really, really soft. And you can, lower that further in this area right here of your layers panel at the very end, but it's best to just keep it really low. So let's zoom in, and especially when you're softening the skin, you're going to want to zoom in because it gets really, really soft and intense, so you kind of want to have more control over that. So very slowly start to reactivate and brush over the surfaces of the skin. Do not brush over the contours of the skin. Do not brush over those areas that you applied your Sharpen to, because that will cover it up, which is basically just getting rid of all of that hard work that you just did. Okay, so I'm just very slowly going in and softening her skin. Resize that brush. Get in all those little creases. I don't want to get rid of her lip. I'm going to resize and kind of do her neck right here. Okay, so I just touched the areas of the skin with that, and you can see that really I've just applied that in a very, very small area. So when I turn the eyeball off and on, okay, and you look really closely, you'll be able to see that the skin has now softened, especially if you look right here, kind of at her chin, that it's softened, but it's very, very subtle, so it's nice and evened out. If, again, it's too intense, you can lower it, but I think that the opacity at 50% for the brush was a good call. So let's go ahead and zoom out just a little bit and look at the difference. So let's turn these three eyeballs off. So this was my after I retouched, softened, and sharpened. Okay, so that was before, and that was after. Before and after. So really subtle differences, but make a huge impact for the person that is viewing your image.